Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today, we are really excited to be doing our first public demo of Observable Canvases, which is our new collaborative canvas that lets you do fast visual analysis with your team. I am Allison Horst. I am a developer marketing manager here at Observable, and I am joined on screen by Caleb. Hi, Caleb.
Hi, I'm Caleb. I'm a solutions engineer here at Observable.
All right, so you know what to expect from today. We are going to start by doing about a 20-minute demo to show you some of the features of Canvases, like fast branched data analysis, flexible code and no code options, using AI to get you off and running faster with your new questions, and showing how we can collaborate using built-in whiteboarding tools. So that's going to get us about 20 minutes. And then after that, we're going to hop into a live Q&A session. We will welcome Tony, who is going to be behind the scenes during our demo to respond to your questions. But then Tony will join us live for that 15 to 20 minute Q&A session. As you're watching the demo, feel free to add your questions right in the chat. We'll keep an eye on them there. Or you can wait until the Q&A session and then post your questions. It's great to see many familiar names and a lot of new names here. So good to see everybody. I think that is all of our logistics, but we also didn't want to wait till the very end in case people have to hop early to share that if you haven't already, you can sign up to be part of Canvas's early access. So just visit observablehq.com/canvases and you can add your name to the list. All right, I think that is everything we needed to get started. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into our Canvases demo. Okay, so here we are in a new observable canvas. This is just in the browser, so it doesn't require any installation, just logging into the platform. We have a few prompts on this canvas that are questions we're going to try to answer through this demo, including how do trends in pricier items compare with more essential lower price items over time, and then some questions about regional differences and monthly revenue. So to answer those questions, first we're going to check out some connected data. In our side panel here, you can see that we currently have one database named e-commerce connected. This is a Snowflake database, and we can check that out by expanding the chevron to see what different tables are in here. The one that we're going to focus on to start is this purchases table, which has almost 1.9 million records of purchases that are in an open data set that stores records from folks who have opted in to data storage from Amazon e-commerce purchases between around 2018 to 2024. So we have this database connected, but you can also drag and drop local files to use in Canvases, and we're also building in more connectors to other database types. So we can take a little bit closer of a look at this, for example, purchases table and see the different fields that exist, like the order date, price per unit, the quantity, and the shipping address. And then really quickly, we can start taking a closer look at what's in these tables. So if I click on this plus sign next to the purchases table, then immediately I get this nice summary table that both gives me a preview of what's in this table as well as these concise visual summaries at the top of each field. So I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see this more closely. Again, we're reminded that this is 1.85 million rows, but still loads really quickly. And we can see these nice summary charts at the top of each field that give us a quick idea of the distribution and what different categories exist for each field. Some other cool things about these summary tables are you can choose different chart types. For example, for shipping address, I can update this to a map. And they're also interactive. So for example, if I brush over this order date, then the rest of these fields are automatically updated to reflect just that slice of data. So I can make these different selections to get quick views of different subsets of data and how making those selections changes the distribution across my other variables. And it's also really quick to just get rid of those different filters to go back to my full data set. Now, from any node in a canvas, you can do quick data processing and transformation using built-in UI options. So for example, I'm going to, from this node, open a menu where you can see that there are a number of built-in operations for common data transformations, like deriving new columns, selecting columns, filtering your data. But I am going to go ahead and use this join op to join this purchases information to another table that exists in this database, which contains just our broader overall categories. So I'm going to join this quickly using category as my variable that I'm joining on. And now I can see that I have, if I zoom in here, I'll see that I have this new column for overall category has been added. And from there, once you've done your data processing and wrangling, then you probably want to take a closer look at your data. And that's really easy to do in Canvases with a single click because you can choose for any field to pop out a large chart. So for example, choosing from order date in the drop-down menu to create chart, I can then very quickly see this new chart node created where I can see this time series with moving averages added for me immediately. If I wanted to change the scope of this time series data, another nice thing with this interactivity is for linked nodes, these are automatically interactive and reactive. So if in my upstream node, if I select a different time range, for example, here to cut off that incomplete 2024 data, then that will automatically get propagated downstream into this chart node. So now I only have that time range that I've selected upstream. I can also choose to create a different type of chart. So for example, here, I can choose that I want to create a high resolution density plot, and I'll add as my Y variable price per unit. So keep in mind that this is working with these nearly 2 million records and does some aggregation very quickly behind the scenes. So we still get this really high resolution but performant chart to give me a view of changes in purchases over time. So for example, here we can see that we see these denser bands of purchases that tend to happen. And you'll see Caleb using some of the whiteboarding tools, which we're also going to highlight later on, where you can see these peaks, and those are around holiday, like high purchase seasons. Now, one thing that's really nice is that charts can be outputs of your analysis, but they can also serve as inputs. So as you see a chart, you might think of new ideas or new questions, and you should be able to just continue building straight from that charts. And that's exactly what Canvases allow. So for example, even from this chart, I can create a new chart, and I'm going to create a chart of the time series. And remember, one of our initial questions was trying to understand the difference between expensive items and lower priced items. So I've created this downstream time series chart, but this is for like all of the data in that purchases table. Well, in Canvases, like I said, those visualizations can also act as inputs, and they are interactive by default. So if then over in this high resolution density chart, if I then brush over to include just these pricier items towards the top of the chart, then I see that downstream chart on the right update just to include those items. And we can see here that there's really not much of a change over time for those more expensive, like luxury items that people are purchasing. Now, we wanted to compare that with lower priced items. So to do that, I'm just going to go back to this high resolution density chart, and I'm going to move that brush down to the lower priced items, and let's see how that changes that output chart. We see this very different pattern. So we see that right around the start of the COVID pandemic, where Caleb is highlighting, this dramatic increase in purchases, which is consistent with what we know about purchase changes, which is around the start of the pandemic, people really started moving towards online purchases for essentials like groceries and household items. So that gives us a quick view and really shows us how we can keep building on visuals and use interactivity to help us explore different scenarios really fast. But you can also, even if you are looking at a single chart type, you have a lot of flexibility in canvases. So for example, starting upstream again, I'm going to create a new branch where I am looking at shipping address. So I'm going to create, for example, I'll create a chart of shipping address. And I can see that the default here, I've chosen to make a choropleth map, but I also have other options. So I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that I could also choose, for example, a horizontal bar chart, or I could choose a bubble map, or I could choose a grid cartogram. So there's a lot of flexibility, and you can quickly choose between different valid chart types for your variable that's been selected. So from here, let's take a look at those larger product categories. So continuing to expand and move forward by analysis, I'm going to go ahead and create a chart where I look at the product categories, and I'm going to look at those overall categories, which we had added when we did that upstream join. So taking a look at these categories, I can then use my upstream map to start asking questions about regional differences, which was our second sticky note question. So here I can, for example, go to my grid cartogram and I can start making selections for the Western region. And I'll see that downstream chart update as I do. But as I make those changes, then I could, for example, tell Caleb, like, hey, I am ready for you to get eyes on this visualization. Do you have any questions? So Caleb and I see Caleb's icon, and you can have an avatar moving around the canvas where he can then start asking questions and adding annotation so that we're both working in the same place. So Caleb, do you want to mention some of the cool whiteboarding features that you can use?
Sure. So you already see me use a few of those, but I can hop in here. Let's say I wanted to look at the southern region here and compare this with the West Coast. So I can just draw directly over this chart, and I can just drag a circle around the region that I want Allison to look into, and then she can explore that right away. We don't have to trade any emails or Slack back and forth. So it makes it really lightning fast to collaborate with your team.
Cool. Thanks, Caleb. So I see that Caleb has highlighted this area. He could also like add a sticky note asking a question, for example, and I can also respond here. So I can, for example, add a sticky note that says, here I see Caleb responding. He says, can we look at the southeastern region? And I can respond here saying, yep, adding below. So, like Caleb was saying, we can really stay in sync in terms of knowing who is talking about what, where, for fewer crossed wires and less back and forth emails trying to figure out exactly what people are talking about. All right, so I've said, yep, I'm going to add this analysis below. And a really nice thing about working in Canvases is you can do this quick, nimble exploration in different branches that makes you a little bit freer to do experimentation than maybe you would feel like you were in linear notebooks that might feel a little bit more constraining. So for example, I don't have to create this all from scratch. I can just go ahead and I'm going to copy the parts of this analysis that I want to reuse, but for a different region. And I can go ahead and just drag those copies down just below this Western region exploration. But you'll notice that there's currently nothing in these charts because they're not connected to an upstream data source. So this is really cool. In a canvas, I can rewire those connections. So as soon as I then drag that arrow to indicate that it should be using that upstream table as the data source, then I can see these charts are repopulated with information, and I can choose my different subset of data that Caleb was interested in. So I can choose this southern region using those interactive filters, and now I have this chart created for that southeast region. Also in Canvases, what's really nice is that you have the freedom to lay out content in a way that is easiest for you to understand and compare things. So for example, if I wanted to side by side compare this Western region bar chart with that Southeastern region bar chart, then it's really quick for me to move those directly side by side, which gives us a nice view of the differences between those. So for example, Caleb's adding some annotation so that we know what things are referring to. And we can see, for example, that the food and grocery purchases is in particular much lower than the food and grocery purchases on the West Coast. So we can add this annotation or manual drawings to really illustrate what changes we think are noticeable here. So we've shown that you can add these large charts that you've worked in branched workflows, but so far what we've really been showing are UI options to do your data transformation and visualization. But in Canvases, you are not restricted to using those UI options. You also have the flexibility to write custom queries in SQL or do custom data transformation and visualization in JavaScript. So you have the opportunity to do the custom visualization and building an analysis if you are wanting to add that in addition to using the UI options for fast analysis. To show an example of writing a custom SQL query, I'm going to go ahead and just for the case of making this really obvious, I'm going to add a new table from purchases again, but I'm going to call this something like obnoxiously obvious. So for example, I'm going to call this burrito. Sorry, everybody who's getting close to lunchtime, but you will not be able to mistake that we're referring to this table specifically across the canvas. Now, with this named, I can use that as a source for another SQL query or another chart anywhere else on my canvas. So for example, somewhere else on my canvas, I'm going to add a new SQL node. And I can go ahead and start making edits here. So I'll go ahead and I'm just going to calculate the total sum cost of each of my purchases by category. So I'm going to select the category column, and then I'm going to find the sum of the quantity times the price per unit. And I'll name that as total cost from, and now I'm pulling this from burrito because that's my name. So this is coming from that name table, and then I'll group by category. And when I run this, you can see that it runs this query, so I can write whatever custom SQL I want, and I still get the benefit of getting this output of these visual summary tables that are still interactive. So for example, here, I could continue building by making a large histogram of that total cost, which we can see. So I can make a large chart, and they maintain the interactivity. So if I go over to my burritos table and I, for example, just select California, then that filter is propagated through my connected nodes all the way down to this final chart. So this is a histogram of my total costs for California purchases. Now, some folks might be totally happy always writing their own SQL code or their own JavaScript or creating their analyses. But sometimes you might want a little boost. And so we have an AI option that you can prompt to get a little bit of a boost in your analyses. So I'm just going to do one little example. So I'm going to open my AI view here, and I'm going to say, make a chart of total monthly revenue over time. And what we'll see happen is in the canvas, and I'll zoom in here so you can see it, we get a little summary of what's being automatically generated. So doing some exploration of the tables and then writing a SQL query. So this is all exposed for us to see, which is really nice, which you could then edit. This is an editable SQL node, so you can make changes to this. And then I'm told, and now I'm creating a line chart to visualize the monthly revenue. So you can see that AI has also updated, has also added this JavaScript node, which creates this monthly revenue chart over time using observable plot. This is also completely editable. So for example, just as a simple example, I could change this stroke to red, and I'll see that this chart is updated. So this is a really nice way If it's faster for you to either create SQL queries or to create some charts, a fast way to get something created that you could then continue building on because all of the code is exposed. And it's also nice that there's a little bit of summary that's added that gives you some more context. So for example, it tells me here the revenue fluctuation. It points out some noticeable peaks that Caleb has also made a note of with annotations. So that's a little example of using AI, again, maintaining the interactivity and reactivity. So this is all just created here using the SQL and JavaScript nodes, but you could also use AI in a way that uses the actual UI options. So as a last little example that I'm going to show, because I mentioned JavaScript nodes, this is just one more example that we had pre-populated on this canvas, showing a custom JavaScript node that does a little bit of data transformation and wrangling, creates a custom color scheme, and then uses observable plot to make a custom area chart. So this is a little bit of a basic example of using custom JavaScript, but I wanted to ask Caleb to share a couple of examples that he recently created to show really like the level of customization and bespoke visualization that you can create in Canvas.
Thanks, Allison. So let me switch over here. So just to show you that, all the power of bespoke visualization that we love at Observable is still here on the canvas. I've reproduced this New York Times visualization of global migration paths. So how I did this was just loading the data into our Snowflake data warehouse. You see I'm running a couple of SQL queries to wrangle the data, grouping that by the migration direction and country, and then feeding that into this custom JavaScript node. So all my data is reactive on the canvas. I can lay out and position it how I want to. And then when it comes time to create the visualization, I can do that with custom JavaScript. And you can see we even produce this particle animation here. So this is rendering a new globe at your browser's refresh rate. And the number of particles are proportional to the migrants traveling to and from the US here. We can rotate the globe around and get a view of different countries. So any kind of custom data visualization is possible. It's really easy to extend your work in the canvas using custom code to accomplish anything you can imagine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caleb. Those are really cool, and it's really nice to see those fully customized and interactive visuals that were previously in a notebook, seen here recreated right in an observable canvas. All right, so that gets us to the end of our short demo of canvases. To hit on the main points, we showed how you can do fast branched analysis with built-in reactivity and interactivity, how you can collaborate with your coworkers, like Caleb and I were showing, using built-in whiteboarding tools that have options for personalizing how you add information to canvases with like colors and fonts and the different shapes that you want to add. How AI can give you a little boost, for example, to generate some starting point SQL for you, or give you some nice finished or starting point code to create a chart. And how you can use no code and code options to build the way that you want at every step when you're working in a canvas, and that you can work interchangeably between them. So you're never locked in to either using UI options or code options. You can work how you want at every stage to suit your skill set and preferences. Okay, so now we are going to hop into the Q&A part of our webinar. So I would like to welcome Tony to the screen to join us. Hi, Tony.
Hey, Allison. Thanks, everyone, for having me here. I'm Tony Sullivan, a software engineer at Observable.
Great. And I see that Tony and Caleb have both been popping into the chat to answer a few questions behind the scenes. We're going to spend about the next 15 minutes or so on questions. So if you have more questions, please add them in the chat. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of those questions that have already been starred. Okay, so let's start with this question. Okay, so this is first question from Angie. Can I have a grid cartogram or a choropleth for the world countries or for provinces of a specific country, or is it locked to one specific default country? That's an interesting question. Tony or Caleb?
Sure, I can take that one. So right now you can only create maps of the United States. That said, we're in really early product development stages. We're planning to build out a whole host of chart types. If you've ever seen like the D3 example gallery or the plot example gallery on Observable, picture that inside the chart node. That's the ultimate goal. So there's going to be a whole host of other options. That's going to include more, global administrative regions and world maps as well. So that's definitely coming down the pipeline.
Great, thanks, Caleb. Oh, and I see I already brought up Tom's question, so I guess we're answering this one. Okay, so Tom's question is he's interested in how big data sets we can handle and how data is transferred. So it says our largest customers can do 100 million. This is local data, right? Or is there some kind of push down to Snowflake?
Yeah,
I could answer a little bit of that. Caleb, you might have some to add too. There's a bit of a limit right now on like how much data can be transferred in any one query that we're running against the database. We don't limit on how big your Snowflake database is, for example. There's also a couple limits related to like if you're doing DuckDB files, you could upload a file of a certain size, and some of those even come down to like browser limitations on how much memory you can use. But our goal here is to be able to support gigantic data sets. Like we want you to be able to work with as big a warehouse as you have and to stay out of the way. We don't want to enforce hard limitations on that for you.
Yeah, that's a good summary. And just to add to that, we run these queries on your data warehouse. So the compute is happening there. And we only ever query for aggregations or samples of your data. Yep. We never like select star from an entire table. So we're only transferring over the network a small portion of the data in that entire data set. That allows it to work with very large scale data sets. So we have customers with, even petabytes of data. It kind of depends on how you set up your data warehouse and your data pipeline. And we're just kind of the front end for that, just getting aggregated views and summary views transferred over the network.
Great. And thanks for the question, Tom. Okay. Next question, and this is one that I think we will have screen sharing to show, is from Pierre. Thanks for the question, Pierre. Is you could have lots of nodes in a seemingly infinite space, which is correct. And I would say like the demo we showed here kept things kind of confined, but you absolutely can branch off into a huge space for your analysis. And Pierre says, I assume there's a list or mini map of nodes in the UI that can be used to do some regular cleanup. So does anybody want to show how you might be able to organize work on a canvas?
Caleb, I think that's all you. You
Sure,
wrangle gigantic canvas collections of nodes.
Yeah, so we'll bring out the demo here. So if you notice in the bottom left corner, there's actually a mini map there. So as I kind of scroll around, you can see the window that's in view, and I can kind of use that to navigate back up to this area. And you see that little dot on the mini map is actually Allison. So you can even track other people on here. I could also, like if I wanted to find where Allison is on the canvas, I could just click her name in the top right. And then we can find other users. There's also some useful features to say organize. So you can create multiple pages. So I can add new pages and I can just copy and paste the work from this. And that'll hook up to my data and work on the new page. So, and then there's also kind of automatic alignment tools to kind of snap and align your nodes to keep them visually organized and kind of reduce some visual clutter.
Great. Thanks, Caleb. Okay. And thanks for the question, Pierre. Okay, here's an interesting question, which is, can you use several filters on different fields, especially using the UI?
You can. So I actually do this quite a lot. Like in one table node on there, you can add filters inline to 5 different columns if you want to. They all combine together, and you'll see every summary chart at the top adjust as you're changing filters in that node. And like Allison had mentioned, those filters all pass down to any of the child nodes in the canvas too.
Yeah, and I'll just add that you can filter across multiple of the fields in a summary chart at the same time.
Yep.
And you can also filter in multiple sequential nodes.
Yep.
So you have the choice of where you want filters to exist. And sometimes that can be really helpful because, like, as you branch off in different ways, you can be thoughtful about, like, when do I want all of this to go somewhere to each of these different nodes versus just a smaller subset. So you can decide, like, how refined you want your filters to be at every step and what branches those get propagated down into.
Yeah, you can also actually, I think in the demo we used inclusive filters where we're saying these are the 4 categories we want. You can actually do the opposite, and on a column summary chart, you can exclude like 3 or 4 values and keep everything else that's in the column, which is nice kind of little hidden Easter egg in there.
Yeah, it is really nice.
And all of your filters actually get translated into SQL under the hood. So, and we allow you to actually copy that SQL. So even if you apply filters through a bunch of different UI methods and different nodes, it'll combine those all into a where clause in SQL, and you can copy the SQL. And so you could create that as a view in your database, or just materialize that somewhere else or run it in another script. So it allows you to kind of continue your work in another tool or save that for later.
Great, thanks. And I also just brought up this screen to show that you can do that exclusive filtering that Tony was talking about. So for example, I can, if these are in orange, these are states that are excluded from this subset. And I can also do the same for, like, in my bars, I could exclude some subset of the data. That is a nice little Easter egg. Okay, so let's move on. Looks like we have some more questions. Oh, this is a good question. So this question is from Hans. Is there a history version or snapshots for the progress that one would be making? Great and important question, Hans.
Yeah, so I can start off, and maybe Tony can add a little bit more technical detail, but version history is definitely a very important item on the roadmap. This is a very early beta product that we're showing you. Version history is another feature that we're planning to build out, where you can kind of see previous iterations of your canvas and kind of roll back if something has changed. We're also going to add a lot more UI to be able to kind of see which authors changed which things on a canvas, so you can kind of track who on your team is changing, what items on there. And then we do use snapshots in the system. So if you run a query multiple times, the first time it'll actually run that query on your database to get the results back. But then we save the results in a snapshot. So they're sort of cached, but it's actually a little bit more permanent, where that snapshot data is actually saved in object storage. So that guarantees that every time you return to the canvas, or if another user on your team opens that up, that everyone is seeing the same data, so that we have some permanence there. And then you can easily rerun the query if you want to fetch the latest data. So that's currently how it works. I don't know, Tony, do you want to add any more detail on that?
Yeah, related to rerunning the snapshots, it probably wasn't super noticeable going through the demo. In the top right corner of every node, there's a little timestamp that basically says the last time those snapshots were run too, and you can click it and have it refresh to get new data in the node. We have some basic like undo redo features in here too. So if you make a change, you can Control Z and undo that and go back one. It's not a full like history or versioning or anything like that, but you get some of those features today, and we definitely want to add in like proper versioning support at some point.
Great. Thanks for the question, Hans, and Caleb and Tony for those responses. That'll be, great to see that further built in. Okay, Jesse has a question, which is fun because we've done some testing on this, which is how many users can you support on one canvas at the same time?
I'm sure there's a hard limit. We haven't hit it yet. I think the biggest one I've been in was maybe 18 or 19 people were in the canvas. In the UI, it'll only show you like 6 of their avatars in the top right corner, but there's actually a menu that will show you all, 19 or however many are in there. I don't know what the exact limit is. I don't know if you've ever come across it, Caleb.
No, but yeah, that's when we had like kind of a big swarm of cursors following everyone around in the canvas at one time, like probably around 20 people. So our company is only 27 people, so we haven't tested it too much beyond that. But we keep it very performant with the snapshots because we're not fetching data anytime we don't need to. So it allows you to add a lot of users at one time.
Great. Thanks for the question, Jesse. And yeah, it looked like just like awesome, colorful chaos when we had all 20 of our teammates and you could see everyone's dots on the mini map. It was a pretty fun session of seeing if we could break it. Okay, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So this is a good one because we did show that there are pre-built charts in Observable Canvases. So this question is, in my arsenal of diagrams, am I limited to things that are pre-built in the canvas, or can I make my own with JavaScript code like I do in other observable tools like notebooks?
Yeah, I mean, you're not limited at all to that. So there's a custom JavaScript cell where you get the input from the last node on the canvas that's connected to it. It's fed into that cell, and you can work with it with just custom JavaScript. So you saw that example I created of the globe. That was just entirely custom JavaScript. And so I kind of prototyped that out in a notebook, and I just pasted my notebook code in and changed a few variable names, and then it works. I think you can paste 1,000 lines of JavaScript into a Canvas node if you want. Notebooks are probably always going to be the best tool for working with custom code, and we know that. So we're working on a lot of ways to make notebooks and canvases more interoperable and be able to connect the kind of data pipelines you build on the canvas and feed that in as input to a notebook cell, or maybe be able to create a custom chart in a notebook and load that in as a component onto the canvas. The exact format of that is still a little bit TBD, and we're kind of working through UI designs and discussions on that. But they're going to, eventually work well together to allow you to prototype with custom code.
Yeah. I will say too, in that JavaScript node, in case anyone's curious, it runs inside of a sandbox for security reasons. So we say you can put whatever JavaScript you want in there, but we do have like security protocols around it to make sure that there's no like a malicious code that can infect your system from there.
Great, thank you. And I think you also, those last 2 responses also answered other questions about notebook and Canvas integration, and another question about creating custom charts with observable plot. So yeah, a lot of flexibility there in terms of how you want to work, UI options if you want, and that's helpful, but also the options to write your own queries in SQL or write your own custom JavaScript. All right. And I think that gets us through this list of questions that we have and gets us to our wrap-up time for the webinar. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining us for this first look and Q&A session on Observable Canvases. Like Caleb and Tony have mentioned, we are making fast progress towards a lot of these questions that folks have asked. And we're excited to keep sharing more about Canvases as we add more features. So make sure you stay tuned because we have exciting announcements upcoming very soon. As a reminder, if you want want to get your name added to Canvas's early access list, you can go to observablehq.com/canvases, add your name there, and you'll get updates on when it's available for you to start testing. We'll be really excited to see how people start building in Canvases. So with that, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Thank you, Caleb and Tony, for joining and helping with questions and the demo. And we will look forward to seeing y'all in our next webinar coming up. So thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.